You know, 10 years ago today, our country had a hero step in, and we're going to talk with him in a moment. But he stepped in, unfortunately, after some people were killed, and after some citizens were killed, and after those in uniform that were killed. I know I speak for all of you when I say this, but I hope that you'll think through this presentation and think tonight when you're home alone, perhaps, or at the table, and remember all of those people. And moreover, the more than 200,000 names that are on that wall here in Washington, D.C., that many of us, we think about, we pray for, and we remember. Last week was National Law Enforcement Week, and for the first time ever, we were unable to hold that live vigil. And for those of you that had the honor and the privilege to attend that, like I have, it's a life-altering event. And for those of you that are watching this in law enforcement, on behalf of the nation's 3,086 sheriffs, every day I thank you for what you do. And I'm so humbled beyond words to tell you what it means to lead your organization as well, to be a part of law enforcement in some very, very small way. Now, tonight we have some amazing stories that you're going to hear. And they aren't stories, they are a discussion, which is important because at the bottom of your screen, you'll see something that says Q&A, and we'll hope all of you will take a moment as you're listening and jot down some questions. Type them in the chat box, we'll look at them, we'll socialize them and prioritize and make sure that they are asked, because I think you're going to find there's some really compelling questions of how things happened, why, what were the results. And Sheriff Mike Neal, who's truly one of my heroes, I've heard this presentation and it's awe-inspiring in so many ways. And that's something that we on the sidelines forget sometimes, is that people like Sheriff Neal, before they were even a sheriff, every day they did things that were beyond words and beyond the pale. So we thank them with so many things, but we need to thank them with the support of just being there for them, especially now in this COVID environment. For those doctors and nurses, we thank you, we love you, we appreciate it. And for those in fire and EMS and law enforcement, we really truly thank you. You know, now before we go much further, though, I'd like to turn it over to a few of our friends. The first of which I just want to introduce is going to be a fellow by the name of Drew Wooten. Now, Drew works for this little specialty distillery in Memphis, Tennessee, Old Dominick Distillery. You know, as I was looking at tonight's menu, I was reminded of how special Memphis is to our nation, because it's, in my estimation, it's one of the two major food centers or hubs, and you're gonna see some really fascinating culinary, as well as bar, as well as dessert. And I just want to turn it over to Drew. Drew is he's a fascinating person in his own right, but you know, he's not going to tell you what I am, and that's where they are, and that's 305 South Front Street in Memphis, Tennessee. It's more than ribs, it's more than barbecue. It's a great town to visit and taste what is really truly Americana. Drew, I'm going to hand it over to you to help walk us through the first step of this process.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. As he said, my name is Drew Wooten. I work for Old Dominick Distillery. We're in downtown Memphis. We're the only distillery currently operating in Memphis. I have some products conveniently lined up here for a little bit of effect. We make several things. We make two vodkas, one being a straight vodka, another being a flavored vodka. It's flavored with the honey bell. The honey bell is a cross between a grapefruit and a tangerine. It's really nice. It's not sweetened, but it has a really good citrusy flavor. We also make a gin, a high rye bourbon, which we're going to be using today. That's called our Huling Station bourbon. Huling is a street downtown, and our company dates back to pre-Prohibition, actually 1866. The owner, or the founder, Domenico Canali, started as a food wholesaler, grocery distribution. And on the side, you know, back then, if you did that, you also sold whiskey. So he sold whiskey. And then after a while, you know, you had fruit carts going around downtown, which those fruits in Memphis heat, you know, the refrigeration back then wasn't what it is today. would sometimes spoil, so he had to come up with another way to use those fruits. So he created the toddy, which is a whiskey-based cordial. Now it's got some a little bit of citrus, some grapefruit, lemon, and orange, as well as some clove, a little bit of cinnamon, and some black pepper and some cardamom. And it's lightly sweetened, but it's really one of the early pre-made cocktails. And back then they used it medicinally as well. It was prescribed for yellow fever, which I think it really worked for that. We only, we were able to save 2/3 of our population during the yellow fever outbreak. So maybe it didn't help. We lost 1/3 of our population. But when Prohibition hit, they quit doing whiskey. There was no way to, it was illegal, so they quit. They focused more on the grocery side, which was booming, still booming. And Domenico died actually a few days before the Prohibition officially started federally. Now, it happened here in Memphis, or in Tennessee, a lot sooner than that, although in Memphis we didn't really follow the law and stick to it. I hate to say that in a video about the law enforcement museum, but anyway, officially we quit doing the whiskey. And after Prohibition ended, we had all the, the grocery business was booming. We had refrigerated warehouses, refrigerated trucks. So we were contacted by a little beer company called Anheuser-Busch, and we became the sole distributor for West Tennessee. And we did that until 2010 when they sold that. Then in 2017, the great-great-grandsons, Chris and Alex Canali, started the distillery. And that's when we officially opened to the public. We started making it a little bit before that. But, it was an old brand, we redid it. And so we're still operating today. And we have Alex Castle, they hired, is our distiller, and she's amazing. Now, the drink I'm going to make, which I guess y'all are tired of hearing me talk and not making drinks, is going to be the grapefruit smash. The smash is a variation on a julep, which is well over 100 years old as a julep. Now, the julep started when ice became a thing, like when there was the technology to be able to, for bars and places that weren't far up north in the winter to actually have ice. And they would use crushed or shaved ice, and they would use mint, as the common version known today, but they would use whatever fruits they had. And they would mix it with some brandy or some whiskey and a little sugar in there and do it with some crushed ice. And, but it was wildly popular. It was one of the, all the hotels served it, especially in the South. It was very refreshing. People loved ice. And the advent of ice in cocktails actually led to the invention of the straw, because people would drink a drink and the ice would hit their teeth. And dentistry back then wasn't quite what it is today. So it hurt and it was painful. So they had to come up with a straw so the ice wouldn't hit your teeth. And so that's why we have straws today. But the smash is basically a variation on the julep where you add fruit. And typically they have citrus, not always. The drink I'm going to make has grapefruit and mint and lemon. You can use whatever fruit you like. Berries, you could use a different herb. You could use basil, anything. Just feel free to play with it. There aren't really new cocktails. I'm of the theory that every cocktail that we drink today is a variation on something that they were drinking 100 or 150 years ago. The smash was first mentioned in print, or the julep was in 1862, and then the smash was in print in 1888, so it's been around forever. So I'm going to start going. We're going to need some grapefruit slices. I'm going to cut a couple for the drink. And we're also going to need crushed ice. And I've got some set aside, but I'll show you how I crush it. If you want to do it at home, I've got this fancy hammer that you're about to see that I use in the bar, but use a can, use anything that's not going to break. If you want to do some crushed ice at home, use your Snoopy snow cone machine. I mean, really anything you want. But that's the extent of it. And I have a whole pan of it down here. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to make two versions of this drink. This one is going to be the way I would do it at home. And the other version is going to be how I would do it in the bar. A little fancier, a little more refined. But in both of them, I'm going to start out with some mint. just a few mint leaves. You want more mint, add more mint. You want less, add less. I'm going to mash them up, muddle them along with the one of the slices of the grapefruit in each. Muddling is a fancy term for just smashing around. So just going to do that. You want to bruise the mint, release the oils. The same with the grapefruit. The reason I use the whole grapefruit rather than just the juice is because it the skin and the pith and everything adds different flavors to it. A little bitterness. There are a lot of oils in the skin. So this version here is how I would do it at home. Just mash everything up. And then to each, I'm going to add an ounce of lemon juice. I'm also going to add 3/4 ounces of simple syrup. Now this is a rich simple syrup, which basically means it's 2 parts sugar, 1 part hot water. Just bring some water near boil, enough to where the sugar will dissolve. And I do that by weight, but you don't really have to be so precise about it. I do it because I need for every drink that I sell to taste the exact same every time. We're also going to add 2 ounces of the Huling Station High Rye Bourbon to each. Now for the one, if I was going to make this at home and I'm not worried about the mint leaves and everything in there, you're more or less done with that. Give it a stir. And I'm going to garnish it with a big wedge of grapefruit and some mint. And I'm going to stick a straw in it. The idea with the straw is when you take a drink out of it, you get the aromas of the grapefruit and the mint all at once as part of the experience. So the first thing you're hit with is that smell, which is a big part of the taste as well. So for the one that I would do here in the bar that you're going to pay for, I do it just a little more refined. So I've got the same stuff in there. I'm going to give it a shake. Mix everything up. Then I'm going to put the crushed ice in the glass. Made a little mess there. And I'm going to strain it. This just makes it, the reason I'm double straining it actually, and the reason I'm doing this, if you don't double strain it, which again at home, if you're having fancy company, go ahead and do it this way, or if you're going to do it in a bar. If you don't do that, you end up with specks of mint everywhere. And, there's nothing worse than seeing a guest you just served with a big speck of mint from your drink stuck to their teeth. So I tend to strain it for the bar here. And that is version 2 right there. And that's the grapefruit smash. I hope you all enjoy making it.
Wow, Drew, thank you. That's pretty cool. I never really thought that. It's a pleasure for me to introduce tonight's featured speakers. You all know him, I'm sure by reputation. You probably read up about him. But Sheriff Neal has a really interesting past, aside from being in law enforcement, things that he's proud of, aside from those 3 daughters of his. The fact is, he spent 10 years in the fire and rescue business. He saved countless lives. It's in his DNA, ladies and gentlemen. And that's something that we all should admire, not just because he's a sheriff, as I do admire him, and he was in law enforcement, but that's something that he recognizes is that he carries that honor around with him for the rest of his life. He was also the youngest to ever receive the grade of captain in that fire agency. If that weren't enough, Sheriff Neal has also started and has led a very established national training company as it relates to safety and security. Sheriff Neal and his life has done an awful lot. He's older than the 21 that he looks like by a few years, but he's also a truly good person. And those are the things that all of us these days really appreciate. Without further ado, to talk about a very tragic, very compelling, and very important lessons learned about the West Memphis shooting in Crittenden County, which is just across the Tennessee line in Arkansas. Ladies and gentlemen, I turn it over to my friend, Sheriff Mike Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Jonathan. I appreciate the kind words. Really do. It's been a long 10 years. Can't believe it's been 10 years today. In one way, it seems like it was yesterday, and then in one way, it seems like it was 100 years ago. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. It's an honor.
Yes. So do you want me to, how do you want me to?
Why don't we do it this way? Why don't you walk through the history of the event, how things came to unfold, and share a little bit about how we got to where you were in that day.
Absolutely. So May 20th, 2010 was a Thursday. It was a beautiful day, just like today was. Today was a very beautiful day here. It started out as a normal day. You know, every day in law enforcement, you get up and you go to work, you know there's a possibility that you won't come home. That day was, one of those days. I didn't ever think that morning when I got up and went to work that my day would end the way it ended. So it was very traumatic. I went to work that day. I was an Arkansas Game and Fish Wildlife Officer. I was assigned to Troop D in the Eastern Post, which covered all the eastern counties right up by the Mississippi River. West Memphis was in that post. So when the call went out that day that there was officers down and they needed assistance, we all went. And a lot of people don't know what game wardens are or what they do. Our main focus was wildlife protection and conservation, but we were also state law enforcement. So we had full arrest powers and authority as your troopers or highway patrol or any of that. So when you get a bad call like that, everybody's going to go. And I answered that call that day. And in my mind as I was going over, I should have been about an hour drive. It wound up being about 40 minutes for me. I was making pretty good time, and in that time going over, you're thinking about, what's going to happen and what if in the situation, how you're going to handle these things. But on the other side of your mind, you're also thinking nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to come of this. They're already gone. It's, we've done this before. And that's where that switch, you got to be able to flip in your mind and shut that off and be prepared for that next moment. And I tell people in training all the time, in a critical situation, you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to rise to your level of training or you're going to fall to your level of training. So you always got to be prepared for that day when your number's called. It's not a matter of if your number's going to get called, it's when. You have to be ready and prepared. So when I made it into town, driving a game and fish trucks, 4-wheel drive, at a high rate of speed, I guess it burnt quite a bit of gas. So I looked down and my gas light was on. I was pretty disappointed, pretty irritated that I had to stop and get gas, because I'm trying to get to a critical incident and I'm out of gas, So I pulled in to a gas station in West Memphis. Didn't know where I was at, didn't care. It was the first place I saw. I pulled in to get gas. And all the things of life were running through my head. I had to hurry up and get gas. I had to get back out. We had to do this, we had to do that. And God has a way of getting your attention. I promise you, if you've never felt this, it's pretty humbling. But I'm that guy, man. I'm blonde haired. I have squirrels running around in my head and pretty frantic. And I realized when I stopped getting gas that 200 yards from that gas station is where Bill and Brandon were killed. And I'm going to tell you, that was a pretty humbling moment, knowing that there was two guys that got up and did the exact same thing I did that morning. They kissed their family goodbye and they didn't go home. So, And, you know, it's been 10 years. It still hadn't gotten any easier. So after I finished getting gas, I was pretty focused at that point. I was pretty determined. Luckily, I turned by the service road there in West Memphis. It ran right beside I-40. And I started driving. And I started thinking, you know, how are we going to handle this? What do we need to do? I had prepared myself. I'd put on my body armor. I had taken my rifle and had hung it around my neck, slung it, had it hanging right in front of me, had my one hand on my rifle, and I was driving with my left hand. I didn't realize 15 minutes from the time that I got into town that I would be in a gun battle for my life. As soon as I got gas, I made it about a mile and a half down the road when the dispatchers come over the radio and they start screaming, "We need available units 798 West Service Road, Walmart. Suspects were spotted in row 12." And, you know, I talk about God a lot, and he puts you in places where he wants you. I was a game warden. You know, who would have thought I'd ever be there? But I had the tools and the equipment for the job that was needed to be done that day. So as I'm driving and that call comes in on the radio, I'm there. I'm right there at Walmart. I'm looking at it. And I passed an unmarked unit. That unmarked unit had the sheriff and his chief deputy in the car. W.A. Wren was the chief deputy and Dick Busby was the sheriff. And we met on the service road. And they turned in one end of the parking lot. I turned in the other end. And the suspects we met right in front of the Walmart doors. W.A. and Sheriff Busby went head-to-head with them first. They were shot immediately in their car. And as they were being shot, I'm coming up from the other end of the parking lot, and I see this. I see the suspects leaning out the window, and they're shooting the police car to pieces. And I knew at that point I had to do something. So in the Game and Fish Academy in 2007, when I went through it, they taught us to shoot through our windshields. In 2007, that was still unheard of. That's the kind of training that the Game and Fish gave us. We were highly trained officers. So as I was driving and approaching the suspect, I knew what I was going to do. So I was driving with my left hand. I had my rifle with my right, and I pulled it up, pointing it at the windshield as I was coming up. And I thought, I'm going to pull up and engage through the windshield. I'm not going to take time to stop, get out, or anything. And about that time, they see me, and they get back in the car, and they start to reverse. And I don't believe they were running. These guys didn't have any run in them. They were turning to attack me, is what they were doing. This was not something the Game and Fish taught us. This was a spur-of-the-moment thing. I took my Game and Fish truck, and I rammed them. State police estimated they impacted about 55 miles an hour. Now, you think about the dynamics of this in a Walmart parking lot. They're not real big. That's a lot of speed, closing at a high rate of speed in a short distance. And it was a hard impact. I was not wearing a seatbelt. My airbag did not deploy. And as soon as we hit, the driver turned in his seat. Now, my push bumper is touching his seat, the ram bumper, the grill on the front of this Game and Fish truck. It's touching his seat. So he's at the end of my hood. He's 7 feet from me when he turns and aims a pistol at me. And that's where I engaged the first 2 shots through the windshield. The passenger then started to engage and started shooting. He was shooting across my body through the windshield. And you can see, if you ever get to come to the museum, you can see the truck on display. You can see the bullet holes. They start at the post of the windshield, and they were coming across towards me. He was trying to find me in the truck, and I was laying over pretty much in the passenger seat, returning fire. The shrapnel was hitting me on my left side. I had a piece of glass went through my left eye. I'd cut my forehead right here when I dove into the passenger seat on my laptop desk. So I'd taken a head injury from that. But all I could think was shoot faster. And that's where I finished the rest of my magazine. I shot 30 rounds of .223 through the front windshield of that truck. And the compression and all the noise blew my left eardrum during the gunfight. I ran out of ammo. I knew I was in trouble. I was trying to reload that rifle. I was laying on top of it. I was laying on top of my service weapon. I couldn't get to my shotgun. I was kind of a sitting duck at that point. I made the decision to put it in reverse. I held the truck to the floor and reversed out. Once I come to a stop, I jumped out of the truck, ran to the back, trying to reload. I was trying to check myself for bleeding and injuries. I knew I was hurting. And one of the officers there, Nick James in West Memphis, stopped and he picked me up and checked me out. And, we re-engaged and made the scene clear at that point. So you're talking about 17-second gun battle, which doesn't sound very long. But when you have AK-47 rounds, 7.62 by 39 rounds coming across your body for 17 seconds, that's a very long time, I promise you.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Mike, some things people may find odd is that in Arkansas, the game and fish are as well trained as they are. Tell folks a little bit about the training you went through, because it wasn't a weekend camp with Boy Scouts that you had.
No. So the Game and Fish Academy is basic law enforcement academy mixed with the Game and Fish Academy. So it was 22 weeks of training. So that was an extreme long time. And in those 22 weeks, all we felt like we did was shoot, fight, and swim. Because as a game warden, you got to be able to swim. If you fall out of the boat, you got all your equipment on you. You got to be able to survive or help someone else in that situation also. So the training that the Game and Fish go through, and a lot of people don't pay attention to the game wardens or wildlife officers because they don't know anything about them. But they're highly trained. They have all the equipment. So if I tell law enforcement all the time, man, rely on your game wardens because they got all the boats, the four-wheelers, the night vision, thermal imagers. We had everything. So we were very, very well trained, and that's what allowed me to live through the day, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that from deputies across the country and law enforcement. We hear it quite often. As you're driving, in excess of 80 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour, down to a scene is likely to be hot. You said, on the one hand, in the back of your mind, you got to count on your training. On the other hand, you're saying to yourself, but it won't happen to me.
Right.
Walk us through that a little bit. What do you mean it won't happen to you? Why would you say that?
So, it's complacent. That happens a lot in every job, not just law enforcement. You get complacent in your job. And you do the routine things every day. Same thing. You get up every day, you work your schedule, you go through your day, nothing happens. Nothing happens. So you start building that up in your mind that this small town USA, as sheriff right now, this is small town USA for me. This is a very rural area. Those kind of things don't happen here. This is not the kind of things that go on in our neighborhood. And, we get that mindset going. And that's what gets a lot of officers in trouble. And that's why I preach and I rely on training. If you're not training, it doesn't have to be a physical training, mentally training, thinking about it, thinking about how you're going to do it. Because if you can't win the fight in your mind, you will not win the fight on the street.
Yeah.
You got to be mentally prepared and focused all the time. And complacency will sneak up on you, but you got to be able to throw the switch into survival mode and fight your way out.
So you're driving high speed. You're running out of gas. You get to the gas station. You said you had that moment of God touching you on the shoulder. You said two blocks or 200 yards away, is where two people lost their lives. What does that mean? What's that switch to you? What did that tell you to do? How did that change your posture?
It made it real. It was, you hear the stories on things that are going on, and I was listening to it as it unfolded in front of me on the radio and things that were going on, but it wasn't real yet until I saw it. And, you know, I could see their vehicles. I could see the investigators. I could see everything that was going on. And that's where it really come down to a focus at that point. Wait, you know, this is real life. This is a bad deal. We're in trouble here.
At that point, when you're there at the gas station, you're hearing sirens, I'm assuming?
No, it was eerily quiet. There was no sirens. There wasn't a whole lot of movement just at the crime scene, and they had the roads blocked, you know, on the interstate. But it was very quiet. It was very eerie. That's part of it. I've never actually processed how quiet it was until now. But yeah, it was really weird.
I can't even imagine. We're going to take a real short break. I want to pivot and let you get a drink of water. I want to pivot over to somebody that every time I hear his name and hear the name of the organization, it just makes me really glad to have been in Memphis. And that's next person I want to turn to is Josh Steiner. You know, Josh is not only the head chef, but he's also the owner of Strano. And tonight, and just for the record,
I am live. Okay.
they're at 40 South Main Street, not to be confused with 300 South Main Street for Dominic. So they're like 3 blocks apart from our other presenter tonight, which is really kind of cool. They're in Memphis, downtown Memphis, and he's going to walk us through some pork belly specialties. And in just a few minutes, we'll get back to Sheriff Neal because there's a lot more than you need to hear. But you know, Josh, tell me all about it. How do we do this?
Well, there's so many ways to do this, and I just want to let everyone know, you know, if you're working at a fire station or a police station, wherever you are, this is something that you can really show off, you know, to the guys or whatever you're doing. So what I'm doing is really highlighting as many, you know, local people, just that's what Memphis is about. You know, we really take care of each other. Actually, the whole South, you know, if you will. So I'm going to get into how we cure the pork belly, and usually you let it rest for a couple days. And then I'm going to show you what it looks like after the smoker, because this is just incredible stuff that we're messing with. So what we're doing first is we have this pork belly, which comes from the belly of a pig, which is uncured, unsmoked bacon, pretty much. I got it from Johnny Kirk over at Third Plate Pastures in Mississippi. It's about 2 hours away from where I live, and his wife came and dropped off some pork belly for me to use. Also, what I'm using today is this pure Memphis honey. A guy down the street ages honey in bourbon barrels. He chops up peppers, has a spicy pepper honey, and this is dark and smoky honey that I'm using as well. Another thing that's kind of cool is we have a crosstown local brewery. I'm using their donut stout. So I'm going to kind of get into it. Before I do that, I just want to thank everyone for having me on here. Again, I'm the executive chef and owner of Strana by Chef Josh, and the new business going on called Wallace and Josh, W&J, with my wife Wallace. And so check us out. Other than that, we're going to get straight into it. So what I have here is about 3 pounds of pork belly from Third Plate Pastures. I have honey, bay leaf, juniper, crushed red pepper, brown sugar, garlic. I got the beer, and that's pretty much it. So what we're going to do is I like using mixed peppercorns instead of just a single kind, like a black peppercorn, green peppercorn, white. I end up using all of them. And there's nothing better than a fresh cracked pepper, because it really goes a long way in the smoker. It helps with the crust. So what I do is start with my pepper. In the recipe that I put up there, it says probably about 3 tablespoons of salt, 3 tablespoons of sugar, as well as a tablespoon of crushed red pepper. And what I'm doing now is mixing all the dry seasonings together with oregano, nutmeg, some crushed bay leaf, all together, and I'm just going to mix it up. And what I'm going to show you guys is what the mixture looks like. It's real colorful. It's very fragrant. And so what I'm going to do is, before I put it on this pork belly, I'm going to go ahead and get my hands a little dirty. They're your best tool. So I'm going to lather this pork belly up with this honey, this dark and smoky honey, like it just has this sweet flavor, this sweet smell, and it's a lot of depth of flavor with this guy. And that color, oh my gosh. Okay, you can't beat that color. So I'm gonna try to show this to you guys. You can see that, flip it over, kind of marinate it in, and then do the same thing with chopped garlic. I have about a tablespoon of chopped garlic, and it gets kind of sticky. The reason why we're doing that, it's really going to hold on to this salt cure very well. So I got maybe about a cup's worth of this stuff in here, and I'm just generously sprinkling it on. And we're going to want to refrigerate this, guys, for about 2 to 3 days. And so what I do is put it in a container like this, a plastic container, very simple. And I just completely coat that pork belly. And I mean, it's just going to be delicious. If you guys had like some thick cut smoky bacon before, this is pretty much what it's going to be like. And I'm going to go ahead and use all that cure. And then, let's see. So I am just rubbing it in there, guys. And I'm going to show you what this looks like here in a second. So up close, you get this cure, this salt, this pepper. It's kind of colorful, to be honest. And then I'm going to add a beer to it. I'm going to try this new trick real fast. She's like, oh, no. Corona, why not, right? Okay. It's not going to work this time. Okay, that didn't work. Anyways, it worked right before this video. I feel so embarrassed now. Okay, so back to the Crosstown beer, the donut stout. We're just going to put enough in there to fill it up about 1/3. And the salt on top of this pork belly inside of it is really going to soak this beer in. And so this is the first step of making your own bacon. We salt cured it, is what this technique is called. We put a little liquid in there, so it's somewhat of a brine. We're going to cover it and refrigerate it for about 2-3 days. Then when you take it out of the refrigerator, it's going to have this nice crust on it. And so in the recipe, it says to rinse it off. Go ahead and rinse off as much of that cure as you can, because it's going to be really salty, guys. And well, it's, bacon is supposed to be salty. So just go ahead and we're going to put this in the fridge. And what I went ahead and did was I prepped up a couple days ago another pork belly, same one from Third Plate Pastures, and I put it in my fridge for 2 to 3 days. And then the next step that you want to do is you want to smoke it. I recommend using an electric smoker or a wood charcoal smoker, nothing kind of indoors. You want to be outdoors, and you kind of want to hang out with your friends, hang out at a fire station, and almost make a little, hangout out of it. So what I have here is the backwood smoker that I got from Sweet Swino Mine, which is a local smoking grill store, if you will. So you go ahead and load the wood at the bottom, and you put the meat up top. And so my wife and I, we were prepping earlier today, so we decided that we're going to have a little dinner tonight. So we smoked, tomatoes, onions. Being in the South in Memphis, you really, our heritage is always being outside, and, at least I grew up outside and doing everything with my hands. So we got potatoes on corn, all in the smoker. But what is super cool is the pork belly. So the pork belly is in the smoker, which I'm going to bring a little bit closer for you guys, that you can see inside here. And what I have underneath it is a pan, so I can put the drippings right on top. So I'm going to show you what to do in between while this is cooking. So this pork belly's been in for about 4 hours. And what I'm going to do next is pretty much flip it around. So after it's been in for 2 hours at around 160 degrees, you flip it around like so. Oh my gosh, this is beautiful. And you just want to put those drippings right back on top of it. I mean, it's just insane. But I'm going to go ahead and pull one of these off now so I could show you what we're working with. But go ahead and do that process every hour for about 5 hours. Every time you check on your pork belly, you want to put the juices on top. I hope that's okay. Smells good. My wife's over there watching me, and she's like, oh my gosh, it smells so good. So what I'm going to do here is, oh, do you see that bubbling? So this has been in there for about 5 hours or so. If I put my knife on the top, it literally bubbles up, and the skin is super crispy and dark. So I'm going to go ahead and slice into this. This is what a final product's going to look like. What I like to do after this is throw it on a cast iron skillet that's super hot so it gets nice and crispy, or chop it up and throw it in the, a skillet, throw on top of the salad, or just straight up on a grill. So I'm going to show you what it looks like right here as I slice into a fresh, juicy one. Oh my God, it's like a bacon brisket, like no joke. So this stuff is my favorite part. It's like the bark. Oh my God, that's delicious. So I'm gonna bring this closer to you guys so you can see the nice fat cap on there. You can see the nice skin. You see it just dripping. Oh my gosh, it's so hot. Anyways, so what I had for you today was this third plate pastur's pork belly with the pure Memphis local honey. And you could dip this into Corky's barbecue sauce, which is another local barbecue place in town. But honestly, guys, go try any restaurant in Memphis. We all try really hard. And I appreciate you guys tuning in with me today.
Tell us where you got that smoker again?
Yeah. Well, open up the smoker again?
Yeah. And,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, I can see it. What temperature are you burning that at?
So right now, I had it at a consistent 150 to 155 Fahrenheit for about the first few hours. And then when I really wanted to get a crust on it, well, obviously the temperature is going to go up the longer you have it in there. If you're using real wood and starting a real fire in there, the temperature is just going to go up. So I kind of let it ride from 150 to around 165. Even let it go at 170. If it hits 170, I kind of open up the vents a little bit, and I try to keep that temperature at a consistent, even keel. But, yeah.
What type of wood?
So you could use any type of wood. What I like to use is mesquite, just because I grew up, eating like the commissary, which is like a local barbecue place near where I lived, and all they used was mesquite. So it's kind of, it's personal preference, but when I taste this, it kind of brings me back to home a little bit. But you can use pecan, apple wood, whatever works for you, but I'm using mesquite for this one.
Josh, we want to thank you.
Yeah.
Fabulous. I can't wait to try it, and it looks awesome. It really does.
Oh my gosh. I'm about to get it. I'm just holding up the skin right here, and it's still colorful.
It's really,
I have my dogs over there, and they're just drooling right now.
You're an artist, my friend. You're an artist. Well, let's get back to our special guest tonight, Sheriff Mike Neal from Monroe County in Arkansas, national hero who, to remind everybody, he's received a call over 100 miles away. He's a fish and game warden for the state of Arkansas. There are 2 downed officers, unknown what other casualties he's faced with. He's driving in excess of 80 miles an hour to get to the scene as fast as possible. He's nearly run out of gas. He stopped at a gas station, filled up. He's had that touch on his shoulder, my God, that says, you're in the fight. You need to get your fight game on. He's rammed the bad guys in the parking lot. He's initiated a man-to-man, hand-to-hand combat via weapons. He's emptied his magazine in his rifle, and is now faced with return fire from the perpetrators. Shots are hitting him and hitting his glass and hitting his posts in his vehicle. He's getting crossfire from the passenger side. And he realizes, one, he's out of ammunition. 2, he's in a vulnerable position. Puts it in reverse, floors it, and backs up. At that point, he's got to get out of the vehicle. Mike, I'm going to turn it to you here in a second. You get out of the vehicle, you check for wounds, you see you've got some scrapes and obviously some wounds. You're there with another officer. What's going through your mind? What is that training telling you now? What have you got to do?
Well, you've been in a gunfight and you're hurting. So first you're going to look for blood, and that's what I was doing. And I was getting some pretty good it turned out to be glass injury. Shrapnel from the bullets was in my left shoulder and my hip. So I knew I was bleeding. So, you know, I'd taken a pretty good blow to the head. That was pretty traumatic thing you just went through. So your brain's going 2 million miles an hour trying to catch up. Your adrenaline is unbelievable, the adrenaline. So I'm checking myself, trying to figure out, do I have bullet holes in me? You know, and if I do, I got to stop the bleeding, you know, whatever. I'm kind of self-checking myself. When the other officer comes up and Nick picks me up off the ground and he's screaming at me, "You're okay?" And I said, "Man, I think I'm hit." You know, put me down, first of all. You're scaring me. But he sets me down. He starts checking me. He says, "You're fine." And he said, "Let's go. We got to re-engage." You know, so as we ran by the truck, I reached in and I grabbed my rifle back out, made it back ready, got it ready for action. And that's when we all started to approach the van at that point. At this time, we didn't know if suspects, how many suspects were in the van. The initial call was it was an MS-13 gang with AK-47. So, you know, we really didn't know what we were approaching into the second time. You know, we didn't know if we were fixing to have another gunfight or what. But all the brave guys that were there with me, they didn't flinch. We all jumped in there and went after the fight again.
I have a question for you. How many sworn law enforcement officers are you seeing from your vantage point now? What is the situation assessed to you?
So as I was looking around, I knew there was probably 10 maybe. I wasn't sure. Now, as this time went on, there was 100. I mean, they were coming from everywhere. But at the initial point of, you know, going to the scene again to make it clear, I knew there wasn't over 10 of us. So, I was pretty comforted by the fact that there was 10, you know, that I wasn't alone. So
you're looking across this parking lot and you're realizing that you've got to re-engage. The officer that's there with you, walk us through that. Okay, we've got to go back. How do we do that? What's the mechanism? What's the tactics that you put into place?
Well, so everybody was trying to maneuver around the vehicles, using those for cover as best as possible to get into place, to get a better vantage point inside the van so we could see what was going on. We were all kind of moving separately at one point, and you can watch all the videos on YouTube. And then there at the last, we all get on a straight line and we all approach the van at the same time. Now, we did not have shields. We were just going up there with the body armor we had on and hope for the best, you know.
There's some medals over your shoulder. Notice that.
Yes.
Tell me, before I change to the next question, just tell me a little bit about this.
There's 43 awards on this wall, and every one of these awards were from the May 20th. And if you look at this one right here, this is the Medal of Valor from the president. Then I can move I don't know if I'll be able to get my computer back straight, but there's also the Medal of Valor right here. This one, that's the Arkansas Game and Fish Medal of Valor. It moves over. This one right here is, if I can figure out, I would not make a good newscaster. This one here is the Buford Pusser Award, which I thought was really cool. The NRA award is right above the Medal of Valor, but they keep going. I mean, they're all the way to the ceiling, and they kind of wrap all the way across. So it looks like a lot, but there aren't enough. I'm sure I speak for the country when I say that. A couple of them. Let's get back to the incident itself now. How many bad guys are there? What do you know? How many are? I mean, you gotta be thinking. Are there more than two? Is there more than what I'm seeing? Where they're coming from behind me now? Where do I have to look? Well, you know, we knew that. Well, we were told that it was the MS-13 gang. So yeah, we didn't know how many were in this van. You know, when the call went out, we were looking for a stolen white church van with the MS-13 gang in it. So, you know, you're thinking there's 5 or 6 shooters in this van. We didn't know. All I knew is, you know, we had to stop that threat. We had to stop the killing. And that was one of the reasons I engaged the van the way I did, by disabling it, because I knew we didn't want to get into a rolling gunfight through town. You know, that it was already bad enough. This was at 1:19 in the afternoon on a Thursday, pretty May day, and there was no coronavirus, so you could do whatever you wanted, you know, so people were going everywhere. And then I can remember people running in the parking lot, you know, trying to get away from the gunfire, and here we were running to it. But as we approached the van, you know, all the windows were out by this point from the gunfire. There was over 200 rounds fired in the parking lot. We could tell that there was only 2 people in the van, and both of them were at that point slumped over. So we were figuring that they were incapacitated at that point.
Yeah.
That's when we went up. We approached the van and we pulled the passenger out, and then pulled the driver out.
You know, there's a question that I want to share with you. I'm going to ask you, and I'll let you think about it a little bit, and I'll talk it through with you. 10 years ago, right? What's going on in Sheriff Neal's, then Game Warden Neal's life?
10 years.
Yeah.
In that dash.
Yeah. Yeah. What's life like, man? I mean, obviously, you know, as the sheriff, you're the boss, but every day you've got to live with this.
You do. So
to carry that around.
And I'll start with on scene. There's a new normal. Nothing ever goes back to normal. It doesn't go back the way it was. It's kind of like the ripple in the water. It changes. So there's a new normal, and it on scene. I thought that was dumb. You know, I'm going to be arrested. First of all, I'm going to get fired. I tore up my truck. I crashed it in the middle of the Walmart parking lot and shot 2 people. I'm going to jail. You know, so that was the first thing. And then time starts progressing on, and the PTSD, which I didn't realize that I had, because I'm that guy. I don't have that. I don't, you know, that's for weak people. That's not I don't have that problem. You know, I grew up in the funeral business, you know, so I was around death and dying all the time. So that, you know, that doesn't bother me. But, you know, 10 years later, looking back, I realized I was a mess. I was really screwed up. You know, I was struggling really bad. I felt like everybody had turned against me, and, you know, and that was just PTSD is what it was.
Yeah.
It took a long time to get to the point that I am right now. And 10 years ago today, I don't want to go back there. I would never go back there. I don't want anything that's back there. My life today is so much better.
You know, Marcia and her team really push an officer wellness message so we can avoid putting more names on that wall.
Oh, absolutely.
You had 2 comrades that are shot across the parking lot, the sheriff and his chief deputy. In retrospect, right, thinking officer wellness, shots are fired, there's death, there's destruction. What would you advise they do differently? What would you have done differently?
Well, you know, in training, we train for scenarios. No scenario is ever going to be the same. That scenario probably never happened like that again. So training for that scenario would be really tough. Honestly, it worked the way it should have. Unfortunately, I wish we could have changed the fact that WA and Sheriff Busby were shot, for sure. But if they wouldn't have pulled in that side of the parking lot, the guys would have been rolling. They'd have been going. If they wouldn't have made that head-on traffic stop, which is the most dangerous traffic stop you can ever make, you don't have that vantage point of concealment as you do from behind. So they're wide open. If they wouldn't have made that traffic stop, these guys would have been rolling. And this would have been a rolling gun battle. They were not going to go down peacefully. That was their mission.
Yeah, let's talk about that before we go to the next break. What was their mission? And and we're going to get to this in a bit. How did we find out about that mission? But what is their mission now? You're assuming it's death and destruction of anything in front of them. Assuming is that what it is?
Yeah, their mission. So they were sovereign citizens. So they were extremists. They had kind of gone off the reservation with their thinking. And in some of their videos that they had on YouTube, they talked about, people would ask them questions. They were teaching classes on how to become a sovereign citizen. And they were telling people, what do you do if you engage law enforcement or whatever? They'd say, pull your gun, engage the law enforcement. That was their mindset, was to engage law enforcement. And the one even said, if I ever start, I won't be able to stop killing cops. So that was their mission. I mean, they knew once they started, they were going to try to kill as many as they could. Fortunately, we were able to stop that after 2 were killed and 2 more were critically injured.
I'm going to ask you one question before we go to break. We hear this often, that the hardest 2 calls for law enforcement are domestic violence disputes. Obviously, emotions are running high. There's a lot of uncertainty behind the doors. And then those traffic stops late at night. This situation, it's all there in front of you. It's I'm sure in the moment, it's bright white lights. You can see everything in front of you perfectly in retrospect.
Right.
At that moment, are you thinking, wow, it's here. I can see what I see right now is in this tunnel. It's in this straw view. Does that resonate with you?
100%. Yeah, their tunnel vision was there. I'm so glad that, we weren't in Baghdad or Iraq or something like that, where threats are coming from every angle. Fortunate for us, it was directly in front of us, because I promise you, I was very honed in on what was right in front of me and not what was going on around me. I was trying to eliminate the threat directly in front of me. So, yeah.
It's amazing. And again, I think we're going to get to this right after this next break. But I want to talk about with you, I want you to think about 17 minutes. What are the types of things that can happen in 17 minutes? So before we get to that, Mike, I want to turn to one of my favorite topics, which is chocolate. And tonight we have another really special Memphis guest, Philip Ashley Ricks. He's the president and owner of Chocolatier. Chocolatier, what a word. I wish I could.
We should be eating this stuff.
I know. It's like, wait a minute, we're talking
We did this wrong, yeah.
So, yeah, Philip, I'm gonna ask you to walk us through some things, but I just want to tell your viewers, 1200 Madison Avenue, Memphis, and talk us through this. Chocolate, my favorite substance. What do you got?
Chocolate, yes. This is what I love to work with, and chocolate's fun. I always, we have a sheriff here that's saving real lives. I say, we're not saving the world; we're just making it sweeter, one chocolate at a time. But for everyone that's watching, I wanted to make something for you that was pretty simple, but something that a lot of people love. So it says chocolate pudding. What we're actually making is pot de creme, which is essentially where chocolate pudding came from. It's just a super rich, chocolatey, thick, smooth pudding with really nice dark chocolate, and you'll see a lot of the elements that will make this up. It's actually pretty simple, and then the refrigerator does the rest of the work. So I've got a cup and a half of half and half in a heavy bottom steel pot here, heating up along with another cup and a quarter of heavy cream. So both of those two are getting nice and warm. So they've been hanging out for a moment here. Got my trusty wooden spoon. I've got 12 ounces of dark chocolate. So this is 60% dark chocolate. You know, semi-sweet chips is what the instructions say. But if you want to, you know, go big, you can 60%, 70%, whatever you want to do. But a nice dark chocolate really goes well and benefits this dish. And so you'll see what it looks like in a second. Got 6 large egg yolks. And so I've just been letting these come up to room temperature. So separate the whites from the eggs, make some egg white omelets or something with the rest. But the yolk is all you'll need for this. So we'll dump that in there. Try not to break them prior to now. But once they break, it's all good because we're about to make up some pudding anyway. All right, so we got our eggs here. And then we've got 5 tablespoons of just regular sugar, okay? You're gonna need that. We've got a little 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla. Use real vanilla extract. I always say bypass the imitation stuff if you can. Then just a pinch of salt, just a little bit. Salt helps that wake up some. And we're just gonna whisk, you know. You got a hand mixer or a stand mixer or something, but this is just good exercise too. So we're gonna whisk it basically until it gets just a nice, foamy, frothy, and basically this is the start for so many different things. Custard, unglaze, if you're gonna make ice cream, you know, it kind of all starts right here. I make bread pudding quite a bit as well. And as you can see, it's starting to change colors if you're able to. So it was a yellow, and now it's a bit more kind of foamy white, just thick, giving some volume. So it takes training for this too. You gotta have some endurance, focus, presence of mind, all of those things to get determination. You don't want to quit before it's ready, that's for sure. And so we've got our cream here heating. And one of the things you want to do, or you want to avoid actually, is dumping the whole pot of cream into the egg. So we got to combine these two things, but we're going to do it just simply by tempering it a bit, just streaming a bit of the cream mixture into the egg. And so this will basically allow us to bring the temperature of the eggs up a bit, because you don't want scrambled eggs for pudding. That wouldn't be too pleasant. Guys in the fire department or at the police station, or, you know, if you're making this for somebody you love, they don't want chocolate scrambled eggs. I mean, it might be cool for something else, but not for this. So, all right, so we got this set there. And now I've got the heat on low now, because we're not trying to cook it, but we are going to let this simmer for a minute. And because we do want this mixture to get thicker. So we want to just slightly cook it. We're not trying to, again, boil it or any of that kind of stuff. So I turned it up to just low, medium low, to give us a second. We'll stir it around. And I use a wooden spoon on purpose because, one, it's just better to cook with in this situation. But we're going to check it because in a minute, we're going to see if this coats the back of the spoon. And it's just a lot easier to determine that with this spoon versus a metal spoon or something like that. So we'll let that go for just a moment. Again, I kind of partially melted the chocolate just for time's sake. So most of the time, I just leave, for this dish at least, I leave the chocolate unmelted, and then we pour the essentially unglaze over the chocolate and let the temperature from that transfer and do the melting for us. But you have to let that sit for a few minutes And we'll still let it sit a moment, but again, we wanted to speed things up, which is why I already had the cream hot as well. So just another minute or two. But earlier, Drew was making cocktails and he was talking about whiskey and bourbon in particular. So I was like, okay, well, if you want to get fancy or if you want to kind of doctor up your pudding, and this won't be for the kids, you can add some bourbon. So I've got a 1/4 cup of bourbon. So 2 ounces, a nice shot of bourbon. And when you're cooking with whiskey or alcohol, a lot goes a long way. You might think, well, a shot's really not enough. But when you put it in the recipe, this is just more so for the taste. We're not trying to, have any issues or anything, but you'll get that good bourbon whiskey, and see, it's starting to coat the spoon. So we've got this custard pretty thick, taking it off the heat so it doesn't cook any further. Sometimes I will strain this just to make sure, every now and then you might get a curd or two in there, but it looks like we're good to go right here. So just pour it over the chocolate right there. Gonna let it sit just for a moment or two to allow it to, again, that heat transfer to melt down the chocolate. And sometimes, honestly, I know I said 12 ounces. If you want to do 16 ounces, why not? It'll give you a lot more chocolate presence. I even think I might have snuck a few more ounces in there. So, 12 ounces is kind of just a baseline. If you want to do 3-4 more ounces, give you a pound. A lot of that also depends on how many people you're trying to serve. This will actually make roughly 8 or so 4-ounce ramekins. We have one here. You can use a coffee mug, a wine glass, depending on what it is you're trying to do. Little cups, little ramekins. And so now that we have this, I was going to use a spatula. I'll just use this spoon real quick. So essentially what you're looking for now is just for this to become one homogeneous entity. Technical. But yeah, so this will you'll start seeing it become one and start turning chocolate. And after that is when we'll put the bourbon in there. And pretty much once we get this stirred up, and it's all nice, I'm gonna switch to the spatula so we can get the edges. But as you notice, I'm in the center of the bowl right now. That's for a reason. That just kind of helps it to blend and mix easier. You're kind of going all around the outside and stuff, just end up making a bigger mess. So takes a little patience. Chocolate's definitely not one of those things for the impatient. You've got to have some, or at least be willing to have some time on your hands for this sort of thing. And this, again, is a very simple thing to do. And something else I should mention, anytime you're baking or particularly dealing with chocolate, you definitely want to stick with the recipe. I know I mentioned earlier you can add a few more ounces of chocolate. There's some leeway in some things, but typically, especially with baking, there's a big science piece to it. So sticking with the recipe, unless you understand how to scale up, scale down, create, and that sort of thing. But we're not just throwing stuff in a pot here. Now, when I cook and stuff, I'm a bit more free-handed and creative. But as you can see here, looks like, as they say, chocolate mayonnaise, basically. It's a big pot or big hot bowl of thick chocolate. See, I just spilled a little. That's what I was talking about earlier. So we'll throw in some good bourbon. And if the dish gets some, we get some. So that's house rules. You can't cook with whiskey if you can't drink it. So, and this is from Old Dominic. Some really good stuff. I put an ice cube in it just to cut it up a little bit. But as you can see, and so this you're going to want to, again, transfer into as many ramekins, coffee mugs, wine glasses, whatever it is you're going to serve it from. And then you're going to let it chill for at least 3 hours or overnight. And it's going to give you a real, just a nice, I normally pour this in a measuring cup, but boom. No mess. Look at that. That's steady hands right there. See? So you got the ramekin. So you're going to just let this chill. Then something you can do is, I'll show you something I did real quick. So I just candied, I candied a few. These are dehydrated in the oven. So these were fresh lemons, or just slice them real thin. You can get some heavy cream and confectioner's sugar, whip that up with a little vanilla maybe, add that to the top. But, you know, trust me, people serve this after dinner, or whenever really, but after dinner, people will love you for it, because who doesn't love chocolate?
Well, that was awesome. Thank you. Quick question though for you, gas or electric?
Gas for sure.
Okay, that's fascinating.
I love gas because it just allows you to cook more evenly.
The only other thing I would say is 4 ounces. That's not a lot. I was thinking more like a beer stein.
Well, you can just tip this whole bowl back and go for it too if you want. So
that's awesome. Thank you. Let's I want to thank our 3 chefs and supporters. I just can't tell you how much it means that you guys would give your time to the Memorial Foundation. Again, Drew Wooten from Old Dominick Distillery in Memphis. Josh Steiner from Strano by Chef Josh and W&J. And then, of course, Philip Ashley Ricks, who's the chocolatier, president of Philip Ashley Chocolates, all 3 in Memphis. Go online, find those folks. I have a feeling they'll be selling stuff over the internet pretty soon if they haven't already. All right, let's get back to our last segment here with Sheriff Neal. I want to thank you again, Sheriff. We're in the Q&A section, so I want to remind our viewers, go to the bottom of your screen. There's a Q&A button there. You click on it, you can type in your question. Before we left, Sheriff, I remember you saying it was 17 minutes or maybe 19 minutes.
17 seconds.
What's that?
17 seconds. I'm glad it wasn't 17 minutes. Yeah.
I beg your pardon. I did mean second. What are all the things that happen in 17 seconds or don't happen? I mean, obviously, not a 2-minute egg, not a 1-minute egg. What other things don't happen or could happen in 17 seconds?
Right. You know, it doesn't seem like 17 seconds is very long, but the way I like to compare it to people is hold your breath for 17 seconds and see how that feels, you know, because in that gunfight, I can promise you I was holding my breath. One, the glass was the dust in the glass and the fragments flying through. At one point, I guess I did have my mouth on because it was full of glass, but those 17 seconds, there was so much chaos going on that it's hard for your mind. Well, you're not going to remember it all, you know. It's hard for your mind to process everything that's going on, and your brain kind of kicks into that fight or flight mode, and then that's where your training kicks in. Once you get into that full adrenaline and into those lobes of the brain and how it works, it's pretty interesting.
You know, we just had a question. Can we do 17 seconds of silence? I think that's a great question. I'd say we can. Yeah, let's do it. In that period of time, changed your life. Quick question from the audience here. Great job, Sheriff. It's going by fast. It says, here's a question for you. how does your experience impact you today? And how do you lead young deputies who've not been through such an experience? I put that last one first. How do you lead the younger men and women coming out into the business?
Man, I tell you, there's only one way to lead, and that's not from behind. You lead by example. You lead by doing it. Hopefully, what I do as sheriff and the way I work, the guys see it. You know, I'm not going to send them into a situation that I'm not there with them. You know, we're so small, I have to be there. So I lead by being there with them in the middle of it. And I push a lot of training on guys. We're pushing more. We got training coming up here in a couple of weeks that we're going to put the guys through. But you got to lead by example. You got to lead out front.
I hear that a lot from our members. Next question is kind of an interesting one as well. Is what would you tell new sheriffs coming that are, you know, in their just elected, just about to be elected, start their term? Aside from telling them they should be involved with their national association, what would you say to them?
Well, you know, I'm not an old sheriff by no means. I'm on my 5th year as sheriff. I've been through a lot of trials and tribulations as sheriff, and they're going to get them too. And the one thing I would encourage them is, one, you're going to have thick skin. It doesn't matter what you do, it's never going to be correct. You know, you're not perfect. Don't try to be perfect. Just follow the guidelines and the rules and do the job the best that you can. You know, most perfect man in the world walked this earth and they crucified him. Why do you think you're going to be perfect? That's kind of the way I feel about it. And don't take it personal. I did that for a long time. I took it personal. I took the hits that I was taking as a sheriff personal. That comes with a job. You're just going to have to let those hits roll off and go on to the next one. So don't take it personal, and get some thick skin, lead by example, you know, be the leader.
Yeah. Question. When you were the suspects injured after the impact, now or after the scene, you've had your investigation, what does it show? Were people injured at impact? Had they already been wounded? Had they been, what level of incapacitated are they at this point? I mean, obviously this is all in your after action. You know this now. What did you learn?
I don't believe they were seriously injured in the impact. I know the passenger was not. The driver is the one that took the actual hit. It hit his seat, but as far as injury to him, I don't believe he was injured because he was able to turn in his seat to point the gun at me, because he had to, you know, bend all the way around and point the gun over his shoulder. So he wasn't incapacitated by any means. He was still very, very violent at that point.
I have a question for you about going back to training for a second. You've said that you obviously have you have a company, a side business that you lead, and we're going to ask you to tell a little bit more about that before we sign off here in a few minutes. But when you go back to how law enforcement has changed in the 10 years in that interregnum, what's changed in training? What is it? Has it become? I mean, obviously, technology's been a big part of training, but what in your mind has made training more efficient or effective, and what needs to be done? What do we need to be giving our agency heads and our law enforcement officers and deputies? What are we missing?
Well, first of all, if their agency is still going to the range twice, 3 times, whatever it is a year, and shooting a paper target and saying, okay, we're good for the year, let's go, they're failing their department. They're failing their men. The administration, they need to change that attitude and that form of training. Also, the stagnant line training, we are starting to see change. Yes, there is a proficiency that the officer needs to be able to shoot, but I'm going to tell you, in a shooting situation, a lot of that goes out the window. They need the basic fundamentals then it needs to advance into something that is raising their heart level, that is increasing their mental cognicy, their thinking ability. They've got to be able to get out of that zone and get focused on the task at hand, running and shooting, make an approach on whatever. That's the things that are advancing in training now that weren't 10 years ago. And that's what I do is in my company is teach guys how to do that and in administration. So there's a lot more focus on the mental aspect of the job now. 10 years ago, 3 days, hey, get back in the truck, go back to work. That's what they told me. They didn't know what to do with me. I didn't know what to do with me. Now, you're seeing a little bit more preparedness for agencies or